Welcome everybody to another episode of The Creative Heart. We are diving into our dragonfly painting, and I've already sorted out some of the supplies that we will need for today's session as we continue to develop our beautiful orchids. So what have I got here? So by the way, this beautiful wet palette, everything's beautiful that works in my life, people, is still all usable. I'll just add to it, and it's the colors that we're currently working with. So at some stage there, you do get to a place where there is no more mixing space and you want maybe some fresh color. At that stage we'll change the paper, the palette, and but for now I think this is my third week that I'm painting with the original wet palette from episode 2, and I'm still using it, and it's literally 3 weeks later. So you guys can see that this is really useful. So I've got here some magenta for the orchids. So I'm going to bring up the reference material for you guys so you can see it. Notice the beautiful pink centers on the orchids. So we're going to need magenta for that. Then I've got all the yellows still, so that is yellow ochre. I'm just going to place them nearby because I still have, actually, let me add a bit of yellow ochre to the mix there. And then I've got cadmium yellow, which I still have a fresh dollop of, and I have lemon yellow, which is also still fine. And then here on the side, I've got titanium white, very important. Now I have another magenta as well. The Lucas Crawl magenta dries a little bit darker than the Prime Art Iris, which is a little bit more, there's a bit more white in here. So I'm thinking I'm going to use this one where needed, and maybe this one in the shadows where it might be a little bit darker. So I will have to dispense that. We're gonna have a little bit of this botanical bliss. I keep calling it botanical blue, which it is, but its real name is botanical bliss from Iris, and that's really pretty. So that's close by. I've got some monastral green. This is like a bright apple green that I see, so we might need a bit of that. So let me dispense a little bit of it here on my palette, and I know it's there. Everything else is already on the palette. I've got some liquid white here from System 3 Fluid Acrylic. This is my titanium white, just to make some highlights and beautiful line work on the orchids. So I'm just going to keep that close at hand. And then, just in case we will get to the stems, I've got what's already on my palette, sap green and pale olive green. So that's also close at hand and ready to roll. So what I've got here that I don't have on my palette is the cerulean blue. I need a bright, happy, warm blue, but it's not necessarily turquoise. So I'm going to add a little dollop of it because mine is very runny to the top there. It might be finished. Let me just shake a little bit down. I must put it on my shopping list. I do need a bit of, there we go, cerulean. So it's also quite fluid. And it needs to be brightened up a little bit with white, but we'll get there. Okay, so talking about white, let's put some white out now. Then it's on the palette. There we go. Okay. Now this magenta story, I can't remember which magenta I put out there. Yes, it is this one. So that's the darker magenta. I already have that, but I'm going to put this one next to it and you'll see it's a little bit brighter. There we go. So it's like one tonal value lighter, if I can put it like that. Okay, so looking at this beautiful orchids, what I'm planning to do is to work from the back color all the way to the color that you see. In doing so, I will develop the shape and the form of these petals. So we'll go slow. So what we've got here only now is a background, and I think I need a bit of a smaller brush for this. I'm gonna go for my favorite brush. Come here. I really need to replace this brush because it's been working very hard, but it's the right size, so I need to get this size. This is a number 6, and you can see it's had better days, but it still does the trick for me. So I'm going to activate it with water. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start with this first orchid. And what we're going to do is we're paying attention that these two petals are receiving a lot of light, and then these structures behind it is pretty much in shadow and it's very dark. So I'm going to keep the dark or ochre color here for now. The strategy will be, I also see a bit of violet down here. Okay, so let's go one petal at a time, because we need to sort of paint the entire orchid before we put in the crown section, which is the, crown moment on each orchid. So let's start with this top petal, and it's definitely brighter. So I'm going to use a little bit of this yellow ochre and a little bit of my cadmium yellow. I'm just going to bring these two colors together. And that's one way to brighten up a color without necessarily adding white to it, is to bring in a little bit of a lighter yellow, because it's so light reflective. And I'm going to paint this top part of this orchid. And just giving it a little bit of structure and volume. And I'm going to use the same color on this petal. Working on the directionality of the petal, and I'm placing it where most of the sunlight will fall. I'm not going to rinse my brush. I'm going to go for this lighter magenta. And I'm going to bring this magenta in. Like so. This is going to be in the background anyway. And I'm going to do the same with this petal where it connects here to the crown. I'm turning my brush slightly to the side, and I'm just paying attention on my reference material where I see this color behind all of these little lines. That's nice. Now I also see I'm going to use the darker magenta. Now if you only have one magenta, you can add a little bit of white to create a lighter, what is it called, tint of your color, and you can use a little bit of black or even a bit of purple to just create a little bit of a shadow, a deeper tone of it, which I'm going to do. I'm going to add a little bit of violet to the toe of my brush there, because this little petal is pretty much moving off camera here. Off camera. Off canvas here. Okay. Okay, so let me just get back into my magenta there. Here we go. So don't worry about too much detail because I'm just going to fill this in a little bit because you do see some of it, but it's very dark. And the crown of the flower is going to go over it anyway. But it does bring a sense of balance to what we've done. And now, while this darker purpley magenta color is on my brush, I'm also going to paint this bottom petal, and I'm just going to twist my brush like so. I'm going to rinse that off. And get back into just the ochre. Maybe a bit of that darker ochre if it still lifts. That bit is a bit dry, but that's okay. Okay, so I need then to create that. So I'm using my ochre and I'm adding a little dollop of the violet to it just to brown it down again because that mix of mine has dried out. And then I'm just going to bring this petal back into it. And my colors are slightly mixing and I'm using it to my advantage to create some of that striations that is visible. Pretty. Okay. I want to brighten up the pink a little bit more. So I am going to add a little bit of titanium white to my pink here. You can also use a little bit of opera rose. That feels nice. Okay, that one is a little bit darker, so that's cool. So I need that one. Okay, so that's basically my strategy with each of these orchids, is just to first look at the overall light and color of each of these petals and ignore the very bright highlights that is noticeable when you look at it. First look at what's behind the highlights and analyze the background color of the petal, because that's going to be your foundation. So now when this is dry, when we come in with brighter yellow and we do that in line work to indicate these beautiful sort of folds in the petal, we will automatically have a shadow in the background that is going to make our life a lot easier. Okay, so one of the colors I notice, I just want to do that there as well, just for me. Just for me. One of the colors I notice now is also that green and that bright blue. So I'm going to rinse my brush. But these are smaller little patches of color. So let's first start with that green. That monastal green or apple green will also work. I see a little patch of it just there. And maybe a little bit of a line coming down on that part of the petal. I'm going to just wipe that off and pick up this blue, and I see a little patch of that blue there, and also with the just next to the green. So I'm just lightly dancing over the canvas here with the toe of my brush, and again just emphasizing some of that striations or lines that I see on the petal. I'm not focused on the highlights yet or the final details. I'm really just looking at the color that I notice in the background. I see a little bit of violet and blue. On that petal. There we go. So now I'm basically going to repeat this with each of these flowers, following each of them on my reference material and looking at the color that I have in the background. Let's look at this second one. Again, these two petals are the brightest and the top bit of that petal. So let's play with that first. I'm going to rinse off. And just wipe my brush, making sure it's clean. And I'm going to use the same strategy. I'm going to use this yellow ochre with a little bit of my cad yellow, just to brighten up this petal a little bit. This top part of this petal, and this is helping me to create the form and give some volume and shape to each of these petals. And the same with this one. Beautiful. You see a little bit of light on the bottom petal there, catching that petal, and a little bit on the toe of this petal. Beautiful. I actually want to go back to my first petal, first orchid I mean, and just bring some of this brighter yellow over as well. I see it on the toe of this bottom petal as well. So this is already making a huge impact on how we perceive each of these petals. Okay. I'm going to rinse my brush. Now, what's standing out for me is this pitchiness along with the magenta. So I'm going to bring in a little bit of that lighter magenta, and I'm going to bring in a little bit of orange. And we definitely have to add a bit of light to that. So it's almost a corally kind of pink. And I'm just going to bring that up from the center. And I see some of it here. Playing from the center outwards. Yes, that's really pretty. And now next to it I will place a brighter magenta. I see here and here. Nice. A bit of the darker magenta with a bit of violet. I'm gonna have to mix it here. I didn't rinse my brush, so I'm creating a unique color. A bit darker. Just underneath. I'm going to rinse out. I'm going to grab my green. I think I need to lighten it a little bit, so I'm going to add some of this blue white. Yes. Make it a bit brighter. So I see little flecks of that green on there. And then we can get some straight into the blue, because these colors are so close to each other. Put some there. Just gonna go over that one again. That feels good. Alrighty. I'm gonna let this dry and then we'll continue with our color story. Right, let's continue. I just quickly had to receive a delivery. Right. Now I'm looking at this one in the background and I'm just gonna go in with muted colors. I'm going to use that cadmium and yellow ochre, but more yellow ochre, to begin to just define this petal a little bit. And I'm using the pure yellow ochre slightly towards the top part of the petals where the sunlight is catching it. Just grabbing a little bit of that light. And then I'm going to mix a little bit more of this deeper color. I think I need to mist this central part of my palette just to get that wet again. A little bit of violet, giving me that brownish or darker ochre mixture. Because this little petal is definitely a little bit darker and in the shadow. I'm going to bring some of the darker at the bottom there, just giving some shape and structure to those petals. Let's look at this petal down here. This is also basically this darker color. Let's bring a bit more ochre as we catch some light over here. And definitely just the corner over there. That's so cute. And then this deeper color. I'm gonna grab a bit of that coral and just give it a little bit of a hue. Some on there as well. Okay, I'm gonna leave this bud for last. It's almost the closest object to you on this entire painting. So I think I'm gonna work on that one last, simply because it's more towards the front. Okay, let's rinse off. I'm going to work on the orchid I keep wanting to say rose. I don't know why. So that's why I pause every time, because I have to force my brain to think of the correct word. Okay, so let's go for this cadmium ochre mixture. We see a beautiful highlight on the top part of that petal, and then also the top part of this petal. And this is almost turned inwards, like it's bent into inwards. So I'm going to try and dip my brush to indicate this shape. And then I see a very bright tip down here, which is nice. That's cool. Also the ridge of that petal. There is a piece of dry paint that's gone streaky on me. Let me just lift that up. There we go. So it's always handy to have a little bit of a stick, or this is a skewer with a bit of a sharper tip at hand to just pick things off your canvas, because sometimes life can be interesting. Okay, I'm going to look at the smaller one in the bottom, also some cadmium yellow into my ochre, and the sort of ridge of this petal, and then the crown or the top petal is also bright. This one is not so light, but it's got a beautiful muted tonality to it. We've got some light catching there. You can see how I'm holding onto this brush, even though it's not the best option for right now. It's okay. When we start going into the details, then you know, we'll fix it. I've grabbed some cad yellow and a little bit of the ochre for this main brush here. Now I keep coming here and then my brushes all wants to join the party. I saw in my last video as well. Okay, so the top ridge and this top part of this petal, and these two main orchids that we are focusing on is really telling the viewer a lot about the scene. This is also nice and bright, and this top part here as well, and the rest of that pretty much goes magenta. And then that last head in the background, let's just bring a nice highlight to that as well. Okay, I'm going to rinse. Now I'm going to look at the magenta situation again. I'm going to go for the deeper magenta on this one in the back. And we're seeing a little bit I picked up all kinds of color there. A little bit of this magenta in here. So I'm just bringing it in. There's not a lot of detail, so it's just very softly referred to. Okay, we've got the pink on that one. The muted ones I'm going to mix later. So I'm going to jump to this one where we still have a bit of brightness over here. In fact, I'm going to finish my petal here, and I will bring this bud on top of it later. Otherwise I'm going to keep painting around that shape, and it makes it quite challenging. So let's just paint the orchid and get it done with. It's in the background. And just get the balance and proportion right here. So we have a bit of magenta on the bottom and also on the bottom petal here. I need to activate my brush with a bit of water just to make this easier on me. There we go. That stays very yellow. And then we get into our big mister here on the side. And I see beautiful pinks talking with me there. And over here as well. And in the back there. And we're going into the deeper magenta and purple mixture. Underneath here. And on the other side as well. Oopsie. See a bit more purple here. Okay, let me rinse off. Now I see a bit of that green of ours. Outlet here, there. I see some of that green on this petal. I'm just going to bring it in while I have it on my brush. And then I'm going to dive into that blue quite boldly over there. Some down here. I like it with that green. Down here I see some. Now that my brush is opening like that, it's giving me beautiful striations in my color, which is nice. So while that is happening, I'm going to come back to these petals where I see a bit more of this color underneath. It's good sometimes just for color harmony, just to bring some of the color that you see in places and just bring it into the color story so long, so that by the time that you do the highlights over it, it gives a beautiful background to each of these flowers that you would have missed if you go straight for the highlights and the foreground of each of these flowers. Righty, I'm going to rinse off. And while we allow that to dry, I think I'm going to get into my liner brush here and just I'm going to go for the smaller one, talk a little bit about these stems along. So I'm going to go for a dark mixture of my sap green, and with dark I mean I'm going to take sap green and I'm going to bring this violet into it. I don't like using black by itself in paintings like this, especially if you want vibrancy. It's better to use contrasting colors to make deeper or darker colors, like your shadows, for example. So I'm going to bring the shadow color onto the side of my stems along, and in my case it's more towards the left side, well, of these ones. And then from here about we start to switch. I'm not going to do that now. to the right side, because we are now on this side of the light source. And we're going to do that in layers as well. So while I've got this darker color, I also see sort of other stems from other flowers standing, you know, with it, or maybe it's a leaf structure of some sort. So I'm going to do that. And it just grounds, you know, sort of everything that you're doing. I'm going to go for another layer on this little stem. That looks better. And then I see a little bit of grass, or more a lighter green down here. So I'm just going to vertically talk a little bit about these greens down here. It's a bit blue on my canvas, but still fairly deep, and that feels a little bit better to me. Okay. Let's talk about these muted colors of the smaller flowers. Okay. With this one, it is in the yellow family. Let me rinse my brush. It's in this ochre family with a bit of this muted color, but then there's a bit of warmth to it. So let's bring in some of this orange and a little bit of the magenta. And let's just warm up these petals a little bit. Also talk a little bit about how the light is falling on them. See some of that warmth here and down here. Beautiful over here. See a bit of violet here, a bit bluer. Back into that coral color. A lot of these colors on these petals are going to come together when we do the highlights. So don't stress too much about like these little brush marks I'm making everywhere now. I'm just harmonizing the color and bringing some of these shades in where I see them, just to help us a little bit later. Bringing some of that corally pink in here. I see some of it here as well. Let's make it a bit lighter still. And it's going to help me talk about this highlight here. Nice. See a bit of lavender down here as well. And then I see a bright magenta there in the background as well. bit of pink here to help define that separation. This is very dark, dark mauve. So I'm just dancing over all of these little petals. I'm just seeing if I can improve the shape and what I'm seeing, bringing in some of that color. Now with these smaller ones, I'm going to get back into this ochre kind of mixture with a bit of violet, because it's muted, and I'm just going to add a little bit of white to it to make it a little bit creamier, but I need a little bit more yellow in there as well. A bit more yellow. Roll my brush so I can pick it up. Let's see what this looks like. Nice, yes. Okay, so it reads yellowish and it's a bit lighter, so I can focus on these little details like that ridge. That's still very similar. It's okay. Okay, we can make that a little bit more fluid. Bring in a little bit more of my cat yellow, and I'm going slightly towards the lighter side. There was white mixed there, so it's going to be brighter, but it's still like a mustardy kind of yellow. It's not very bright. Just trying to capture some of these lighter areas. Nice. So you just dance around with each little flower, constantly looking at your reference material, and just see where you can add a mark or a line that will help to communicate to the viewer what it is that you are seeing. And sometimes flower has interesting ways of showing how the light is hitting each petal. So it becomes quite fun if you work from deeper tones and you develop it further with your highlights. I find that makes my life a lot easier. And it's also an opportunity for me to correct the shape of the petal if I feel it needs to be bigger or rounder. And that's not even our brightest highlights yet. This is just the beginning. I see a very bright highlight here, so I just want to bring that in. So while I've got this bright yellow, mustardy yellow, I'm going to go back to my original first petal and just begin to talk a little bit about these highlights. But we are definitely going to go brighter still. Just dancing on the toe of my brush. And I'm being very mindful about the directionality of each of these brush marks, that it continues to support the story that I'm trying to tell, that this is an orchid leaf and this is how the light is falling on it. I'm not trying to paint an orchid. I'm literally looking at shapes and value. Shapes and value. That's really all I'm focusing on as I dance over each of these little petals with this particular yellow at this stage of the journey. And once you've found a value that is working on your painting and it's bringing contrast and life to your composition, then that is exactly the right place for you. Then roll with that. Each of these little marks in the end completes the painting. Don't overthink it too much. Remind yourself you're not a Minolta. You are an artist and you are just capturing the light and the shape and the value. That is your job. Okay, I need a little bit more cadmium yellow. I've used it all up now. And I can see that my value is now starting to become lighter than the rest. So let's get back to our value that we are currently working with. We need a bit more of that ochre in it just to calm it down again. Let's add a drop of water as well. Improve the fluidity of your paint. Okay, I'm going to move down here. Just riding on the toe. Bit more water. Beautiful. Okie dokie. Look how far we've come already, people. Everything works in layers. I'm going to add another layer to the stems. And for this, I'm going to get into that pale olive green of mine. I'm going to just add a little dollop of it. I don't need a lot of it. But I need it here particularly to just improve its flow. I think we need to add a drop of water there. Roll your brush and just get it on the toe. I want a little bit more of that brighter green color hitting that stem, giving it a slightly more greener value. Yellow green, that is. And I'm going to go back into that dark green of mine, but I'm going to add a bit more sap green to it. So it's not quite as dark as it was, but it's also not as light as what we've just added. And this just goes in the middle. Between the highlight and the low light. This is going to give you that beautiful mixture between the two shades. Nicely done, Mr. Crowcom. Okie dokie. I think what I'm going to do is we're going to break here. I want you guys not to be overwhelmed. This is quite a lot to do, but you can see that we've really just began to tell the color story on the petals. When we come back, we are going to focus a little bit more on the shadows. And then we're going to brighten this up with all of the beautiful highlights. And lastly, we're going to put in the little mouth of each of these orchids, which is going to just complete it. So they're all going to look a little bit eyeless almost for a moment. So give yourself some grace and some space. And remember, this is all about just developing the shape and the color of each of these petals that we see underneath all of the shadow and highlight. So that's sort of what you are focusing on when you're looking at your reference material, and just bring them forward from that very dull, dark yellow ochre that we started off with. But you can see now how it's really giving us a beautiful background to play on. I find it a very useful tip in general when I develop my paintings, is to first look at the deepest shades that I can see in a particular part of a painting, and to develop it into a lighter shade from there. It just makes my life a lot easier, and it's one of the joys of acrylic paint. I mean, you can always go darker again, but then you have to develop the lights again as well. So starting off from a good foundation, deep color, gives you the opportunity to lighten and brighten it until you are happy with it. And I find that to be a key to success. So hopefully that is a hint that you, or a tip that you can make use of. So I'll see you in the next session when we play a bit further with our orchids. And remember to take a photograph and share it with me on the Creative Heart, on the Patreon, and on the subscription on TikTok. I really enjoy seeing what you guys are doing it. Stay creative. Until next time. Bye bye for now.